Hi everyone, this is Nihefni. So today we are going to discuss an important cardiology concept, which is the shock. So as we see here in this question, she's a 59-year-old female that's rushed after experiencing the gastric discomfort diaphysis and severe nausea. She has a hyperbolic controlled hypertension. On examination, she got a hemodynamic instability readings, like in the blood pressure is below the 90 over 60, pulse is bradycardic, and the auscultation of the lung is clear. There is no crepitation, but there is GVD and the ECG revealing and posterior MI and the coronary angio confirming this finding. So, what about the hemodynamic profiles? So, actually, she got a hemodynamic instability. There is no basal crepitation. There is GVD and the ECG is posterior MR. So, she's got a cardiogenic shock. And the answer here will be B, as the GVD reflects the central venous pressure will be high and there is no basal crepitation, so the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure is free, so it will be low, and the hemodynamic instability and being a cardiogenic shock, of course, the cardiac output will be low. After that, we're going to discuss how I approach usually the shock questions. So the first thing I'm going to think about is the cardiac output itself, whether it's increased or decreased. If it's increased, so this is giving me a great hint towards the distributive shock and all of its types. The distributive shock main pathophysiology is the vasodilation of the vessels and the capillary leak through it. So, as an example for this, if the patient had a spinal injury, so of course it's a neurogenic shock, and the same thing, capillary leak and vasodilation. Septic shock by the toxins of the sepsis, the same thing, vasodilation. Anaphylactic shock, the same thing, but as it is decreased, so we are going to dive deeply towards the other types of shock, like the cardiogenic, the hypovolemic, and of course the obstructive. So we need to assess another finding, which is the central venous pressure and the capillary wedge pressure. The central venous pressure is the pressure of the right atrium, and of course it will be reflected on the jugular veins, while the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure is reflecting the left atrium. So if they are increased, so we are going to have a cardiogenic shock. And I want you to imagine that a cardiogenic shock is a pump that's failing to pump this blood. So of course the blood will be accumulated inside that chambers, and after accumulation it will increase the stress forces towards the wall. So of course the pressures will be high. But if they are decreased, so we are going to think about the hypovolemic shock, as the hypovolemic shock is decreased the blood in the system itself. So of course the pressures will be low. But what about the obstructive shock? So actually the obstructive shock is a little bit complicated. As the obstructive shock, let's think about it's an obstruction of the outflow. So of course the cardiac output will be decreased. And after that, the reflection of that outflow obstruction will be reflected into the right ventricle and to the right atrium, leading to increased central venous pressure. So till now it's mimicking the cardiogenic shock. But we need to know the etiology of the obstructive shock by the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. If it's increased, so we are going to think about a cardiac tamponade. That's because the cardiac tamponade is accumulation of blood surrounding the heart from all of the sides, leading to failure of the diastole and the filling of the chambers. So the blood will be accumulated in all chambers and increase the pressure in all chambers. While if it's decreased, so we are going to think about the pulmonary causes like the pneumothorax and of course the pulmonary embolus. So as a hint, the tamponade is just an cardiogenic obstructive shock. Back to our case, as we said that she is 59-year-old and she's got a posterior MR, so it's a cardiogenic shock. And of course, by the physical examination, the GVD is reflected to the CVB, and the clear breath sounds reflect there is no pulmonary capillary wedge pressure increase. So we know the answer already, but let's exclude the other. So at the first, as we said in the approach, the first thing is the cardiac output, whether it's increased or decreased. If it's increased, so we're going to think about distributive shock. But we got two answers of increased cardiac output, which is D and E. So let's go to the other things. Increased and decreased central venous pressure. So this is actually mimicking or matching the answer of a distributive shock. As we said, there is a capillary leak with the vasodilation, so the blood returning to the heart and the venous return is low. So at the same thing, central venous pressure and the capillary wedge pressure will be low. So we're gonna exclude D. What about E? Actually, E, all of the pressures is high. This is mimicking the cardiogenic shock and the increasement of the central and the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, which actually mimic the heart failure a little bit. So we got a high cardiac output heart failure, which is with the hyperdynamic circulations like the thyrotoxicosis, the anemia, baggage disease, beriberi, and a lot of things. Of course, pregnancy is another answer. We got now all the answers of low cardiac output. We got low, low, low. So this is actually matching the hypovolemic shock, and we're gonna exclude it. What about B or C? Let's go for C at the first. So decreased cardiac output, increased pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, and decreased central venous pressure. Actually, this is making no sense. So we're gonna exclude this also. And we got our answer, which is B. But again, as I said, it's a posterior MI, so it's the right ventricle is infarcted, so it can pump the blood well to the lung and then to the left side. So of course there will be no accumulation of the blood in the left side, and the pulmonary capillary pressure will be low. So that's all for today, and thank you for watching.